Fit to Love, episode 76, How I Healed My Back Pain.
Fit to Love is physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness to achieve the happy life you deserve. From exercise to cooking, relationships, and spirituality, you'll find all the inspiration you need right here with our host, JJ Flazane.
Hello and welcome to Fit to Love Wellness Wednesdays. Today's show, How I Healed My Back Pain. What's really great about some of the body of work that I've done in the past is that now that I have a podcast show, I can pull some of that work forward and share with you some of the things that I've shared with my community over the years. This show was actually recorded several years ago when one of my friends, who is a writer, director, and producer who's based in New York City, had some serious back pain and went through trials and tribulations of potential surgeries and physical therapy and things like that. And I really wanted to share his story because he was the one that brought to me the newest, latest, greatest research and pioneers in the field of mind-body connection. So I wanted to share that show with you today. It's a very interesting story and I hope you enjoy it. Let me tell you a little about Sri. Sri Rao is a writer, director, producer based in New York City. He's created and sold numerous TV pilots in both network and cable television, spanning drama as well as comedy. Recent credits include dramas Alpha Omega to BBC America, White House Affairs to NBC, Courtesan to Universal, The Black Widow to NBC, and comedy S.O.B to ABC with Kelly Ripa. He began his career in New York's indie film and theater scene. His first professional production as writer-director was a play, Precipice, which premiered at the New York Performance Works before transferring to LA Greenway Court Theater. Sri then adapted Precipice into a pilot, Quarter Life, before going on to write and direct the indie film Tuesday. I've known Sri for many, many years, and I am very thankful that he granted me this interview years ago and that I'm getting to share it with you today. So if you enjoyed today's show and you know somebody suffering with back pain, I can't encourage you enough to share this information because too many unnecessary surgeries and expenses and things are going on when some of the answers are really right at our fingertips. So I hope you enjoyed today's show.
Hello, Sri.
Hello.
Thank you for being here today. I have been working with clients with exercise and weight loss and pain, actually, for about close to 15 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime one of my clients or someone that I know has back pain that does not seem to get relief from the traditional therapies, that lingers, that's chronic, I always think of you, and I always think of your story, and I always think of the book, Healing Back Pain. For the people that know about the book, they may think it's woo-woo information, and so I want them to hear firsthand from you, who has experienced exactly what they have experienced, who's gone through all these different stages, your story about your experience with healing your back pain.
Okay, great.
So let's start with when it first started. You and I have known each other, goodness, since when? 1990-something?
Seven, maybe? 1987, yeah.
Okay. And back then, did you have back pain then?
No, I didn't. It started for me a few, maybe like a year or so after we met, maybe like in 1998 or something like that, when I was still pretty young. I was only 24 probably at the time. And it came, in the most random way, but probably a very typical story where I lifted something the wrong way. And then I just immediately felt this excruciating pain in my lower back. And I was debilitated for a good 24 hours. I couldn't move, and all I could do was just lie on the bed and be in agonizing pain for that entire time. And this was my first experience with back pain. And just to say that it was a good 6 to 8 months after the initial injury, and I was still in very debilitating pain at that point, as you recall, where I couldn't, I was so conscious of the way that I was sleeping and the way that I was standing and the way that I was sitting. And so it was something that started very innocently enough, just by lifting something the wrong way, and then, it just overtook my life for several years thereafter.
And who was the first person, doctor, therapist, whomever, who did you see after you did the first initial injury?
I first went to see an orthopedist. It's an orthopedic surgeon. It's so hard to remember because in the course of this whole journey for me, I saw so many doctors and specialists and orthopedic surgeons and neurologists and physical therapists, and there were so many people that I saw. It's hard to remember who was the first, but I think the first place that I went was an orthopedic surgeon to get an MRI.
Okay, so you got the MRI, and what did it say?
And it said that I had a herniated disc. At that point, it said that my herniated disc was L5S1. And
it's
then
basically like your tailbone. It's your lumbar 5. It's your lower back. It's the last one on the lower back. S1 is your sacrum. So, and that's your sacrum doesn't really move as much as your lumbar. So it's that really the tailbone.
Right.
Was it pinching on a nerve or something?
Yes, it was pinching on a nerve, and so the pain was radiating down my left leg.
What did they tell you to do about it?
At that point, they gave me the steroid pills, I believe, at that point, and they prescribed for me physical therapy, which I then began 3 times a week for about 6 months, I would say.
Did the steroid pills do anything?
No. I mean, there might have been a placebo effect, because you have to take these. So much about this, and I may be jumping a little bit ahead here, but so much about this really turns more into being about the ritual than about the actual medicine. Like the steroid pills, like it's this whole regimen that you have to take for like 6 days or something, and you have to take like 6 pills on the first day and 4 pills on the second day, and like I don't even remember what the packet is, but there's like this ritual around it, and then the physical therapy becomes like this part of your life that you go to like 3 times a week for weeks and weeks and weeks. And at a certain point, I believe now, looking back on it, that it stops being about physically what's happening to you and medically what's happening to you, and becomes more about this ritual in your life and how this injury and how this back pain sort of like overtakes your entire life.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone that I know who has back pain, it's the center of the life. It's sort of, people allow it to, it makes excuses for why I can't do this or why I'm in this kind of mood, or, I can't do this or I have to go see this person. So you went through all these rituals of things, and you went to physical therapy for 6 months. Did you see a difference in your back in that 6 months?
Yes, you see a difference in that, I became less stiff. My muscles became less stiff around my back, and in my core they became a little stronger. And the massage definitely feels good. The heat feels good. The ice feels good. But it's very subtle change. And so you tell yourself that, I'm feeling better, or you tell yourself that, no, it's not really getting significantly better. And, I continued to be in significant pain. And then over the course of the next 2 years, I just went through round after round of it was a perpetual pain for 2 solid years. The pain never went away. I can tell you that there was not a day when I did not have pain. There was not a day when I woke up and the first thing that occurred to me in my mind was my pain. There was not a day when it didn't keep me up at night and was the last thing that was on my mind before as I was trying to fall asleep, but I couldn't fall asleep because I was uncomfortable. So there may have been moments when it got, marginally better, but then there were definitely moments when it got much worse. And I re-injured myself at a certain point a year later, and that wasn't from doing anything in particular. It's just one morning I woke up, and I was actually in LA at the time. This was probably like a year after. I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. I physically couldn't get out of bed, and I was in LA, and I live in New York, and so I was on a business trip, and I was supposed to only be there for a week, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I ended up in the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai for 12 hours waiting to be seen. I didn't have insurance to cover me out of network, and that week-long business trip ended up lasting 2 months because I couldn't get on a plane to go back to New York. And like I said, I didn't have insurance coverage to cover me. The insurance coverage would cover me for emergency outside of my home area, but it wouldn't cover me like beyond that. But I ended up having to see an orthopedic surgeon at Cedars-Sinai and going into treatment there in LA, and just trying to get to the point where I would be well enough to sit for 6 hours to be on a plane to go back to New York. And it took me about 2 months, or if not 6 weeks, to get to that point of just getting back to New York. So, it was really bad. And then and it was at that point that I got another MRI, and then they told me now I had 2 herniated discs. I had L4, L5, and L5S1. And then the pain down my left leg became monumentally worse to the point where I lost most of the sensation in my left leg. So when I did end up getting back to the East Coast, I ended up going to see a neurologist, and mind you, while this is all going on, for those of us who have this kind of chronic pain, you're dealing with the pain on a daily basis. Then you're dealing with the second layer, which is the negotiating of your life around the pain, which is, how am I going to go to the movies and sit for 3 hours? Or how am I, if we go to dinner, I have to make sure that it's a restaurant that doesn't have hard seats. Or if I go to someone's house for the weekend, I need to make sure that their bed is firm enough, or I'm going to sleep on the floor, or I'm going to put pillows under my knees. And so there's all this negotiating going on. And then the third layer of how it consumes your life is that you're constantly researching and trying to find the best doctors and trying to find, what therapies will work and what yoga and physical therapy or acupuncture or herbals or traditional Western medicine and who are the best doctors. And so you're doing all this stuff on top of it. So bringing me back to the story, that research led me to a guy actually in Philadelphia who is supposed to be one of the top neurologists in the country who deals with back pain. And he examined me and told me, when I went back after he did the initial tests or whatnot, he told me, I'm sorry to tell you that you've lost 80% of the nerve function in your left leg, and unfortunately it's permanent. And you might be able to reverse some portion of it, but you're really looking at having permanent nerve damage in your left leg, because it had been 2 years of suffering from this injury and had gotten so acute. So then it was at that point I was like, I'm still in my 20s, and you're telling me that I'm not going to be able to feel my entire left leg for the rest of my life. And I was like, there's got to be something that I can do. And he said, well, there is this pill that you can take, and it's still experimental, and I don't know what the term is, but it's something like off-label use or something like that. It's actually an epilepsy drug, but at that time they were experimentally using it for people who were in my condition. And as soon as he said that it was an epilepsy drug, and then he started going through, the fact that it was experimental and all the very serious side effects that I could get from taking this pill, I was like, that's it. I can't. I mean, I was like, I've tried everything, but this is the point where I sort of reached my breaking point. And I think that everyone at some point reaches their breaking point where they realize, I can't keep doing this. Something's got to change.
And so when did this book, I know that this book came into your experience twice. The first time it came in, you rejected it, and then it came in again. So tell me about the first time that how did it happen?
Yeah, it actually came into my life 3 times. The first time was when I initially injured myself, and someone, actually I think the person actually gave it to me. And I started reading the first 3 pages, and it basically, because it talks about mind-body medicine, and I started reading the first 3 pages, and the way that I heard it when I was reading is that all this pain is in your head. And I got so angry. I just couldn't. I was like, this is ridiculous. I mean, this pain is not in my head. This pain is very real, and it's very severe, and it's debilitating. And for you to insinuate that it's in my head really offends me, and so I threw the book away. And then the second time was actually my physical therapist mentioned the book to me and told me about it. And I was like, oh, no, I got that book, and I threw it away, and I'm not interested in going down that path. And then the third time was the point where the neurologist told me that I had lost 80% of the feeling in my left leg and would have for the rest of my life. That was the third point when I realized that I was desperate at that point, and I was like, I will try anything at this point. And so the book somehow came back into my life. I don't remember exactly how, but that was the time when I was actually open to it, and I was like, okay, fine, I will finally read this book.
And if I remember correctly, didn't you read it on a train?
I did. I read it on a train. I was actually going up to Brian's place in New York, and I read it on a train. I started reading it, and this time I was open, emotionally open to receiving the message, and I wasn't so closed off and so defensive. And so I was able to really hear what the author, Dr. John Sarno, was saying in the book, and that he's not saying that it's all in your head. That was I misheard it the first time around. And I think that a lot of people who are in pain, when they hear about mind-body medicine, they immediately think that people are trying to tell you that it's crazy, that it's psychosomatic, that's all in your head. But that's not what we're saying at all. That's not what mind-body medicine is about at all. It's actually much more complicated than that. It's a lot more complicated than that, and it's a lot more simple than that, And so I started reading it on the train, and for some reason this time I was open to the message, and I was on the train for 4 hours, and I have to tell you that by the time I got off the train, my pain had decreased by maybe about a quarter. And this is pain that I had been living with for years without any relief whatsoever.
Had you finished the book on the train?
I had gotten about halfway through, maybe 3/4 of the way through. I hadn't even finished the book, and I was already feeling a difference physically with my pain. Okay,
so then you go to the end and you finish the book, and then what?
I finished the book, and then the book is just conceptual. The book is just concepts, and I think that when you're first presented with the concepts and you understand them, there's an immediate, like your body has an immediate and your mind has an immediate response to it that if you get it, that immediately changes the way that your body is physically and the way that your body is functioning. And so that has an immediate effect in regards to pain. But the book is really just the beginning of the work. It's just presenting to you, it's sort of unlocking the door to how you can be living your life differently and how you can be moving through your life differently in terms of your body and in terms of your emotions and in terms of your mind. So for me, what that meant is that it started a journey, which I'm still on to this day, about exploring the relationship between my body and my emotions and realizing that they are not separate. And if anything, my body is the best signal to me about what's going on in my life emotionally and spiritually. And it's not two separate things. It's not like, there are many people out there that are spiritual, and I'm one of them, and it's not like you go to the yoga mat or you go and sit and meditate or you go to church or you go and read self-help books and you're dealing with your spiritual side and your emotion, or you go to therapy and you're dealing with your emotional side of your life during those times, and then separately you go to the gym or you go to physical therapy or you go to your chiropractor or you go to your doctor and deal with the physical side of your life separately. It doesn't work that way. It's like it's all has to happen together in order to really be healthy and pain-free.
So after you read the book and you thought, wow, okay, this is it, you then, if I remember correctly, had a few sessions with Dr. Sarno, correct?
I did, yes. And really all that was he is a doctor, and he's an orthopedic surgeon by training, but he didn't even lay his hands on me, So the treatment, quote unquote, that I got, both from him and then, I only met with him, I think, like twice or maybe 3 times, and then continued the work on my own, was entirely emotional and spiritual and psychological. So it involved a lot of journaling, a lot of, for lack of a better word, meditating. And by meditating, I just mean thinking, I guess, because I don't want to scare people off by thinking like it's some sort of like woo-woo, like you have to sit and close your eyes and deep breathing or anything like that. It's just more about, there's lots of different ways to do it. I'm a writer, so for me, journaling was helpful. It could be through talk therapy with a therapist. It could be through meditation and going sort of inside. There's a lot of different ways to get there, but what's more important is that people understand what you're trying to do and the fundamentals behind it.
You're Indian, and you've meditated your whole life. So tell me about the difference, because I believe there are people that meditate to go inward and to connect or to hear or to quiet, and then there's some people that, and I believe this was you, and I think you had said this to me in the past, that you meditated and sort of pushed it down. You shoved it down. Like It was more of a detachment. Would you agree with that?
Oh, God. Meditation is such a powerful, can sometimes be such a powerful form of repression, because you get to say to yourself and to the world, like, oh, I'm so spiritual and self-actualized, I meditate every day or I meditate every week or whatever, and so you think that you're being like quote-unquote good and you're somehow being, very spiritual and self-actualized. But many times, meditation, for many people, and I was one of these people, can just be a way of trying to shut off, quote-unquote, that you're supposed to close your eyes, you're supposed to focus on your breathing, and you're just supposed to become calm. And this whole idea of becoming calm is a total fallacy. Meditation is not about becoming calm if your way of becoming calm is just to squash everything down. The majority of people look at meditation in this way. I would go so far as to say that, even seasoned practitioners of meditation approach meditation in this way, which is that there's all this stuff going on in my life. I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. I'm mad at my boss. I'm mad at my partner. I'm sad about this. I'm angry about that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to meditate to calm myself down. So in the midst of all that, you sit down, you close your eyes, you start breathing, you focus on your breath until you get to a place where all of those emotions have washed away and you feel like, okay, now I achieved it and I feel so much better and now I can open my eyes and go back to my life. When that is really, I don't want to, make a blanket statement, but
Make a blanket statement. Go for it.
Yes, the blanket statement is that is really just another form of repression. That is no different than the people who avoid their problems and their emotions by drinking, or avoid their problems by not thinking about it, by turning on the TV, by eating, by
smoking.
By smoking, that's no different. It's just aversion. It's just a way of avoiding what's going on in your life. But the reason that this is so tricky is that, like, people who smoke or who drink or who overeat, they have physical signs to themselves and to the world that, like, okay, they're avoiding their issues. But people who meditate, they don't have those signs. If anything, they have a badge of honor that say that they can wear to the world and say, oh, I deal with all my issues because I meditate, when in actuality that is often not the case.
Thank you. That was brilliant, and it came out of your mouth because you're the one who's experienced debilitating pain. So tell everybody, after you guys ever read this book and you saw Dr. Sarno, did you ever have the surgery?
No, I did not have the surgery, and I won't say that I will have no back pain, because I know that my back is a trigger point in my body. For me, my back is a trigger point. I think this is real quick, like the main principles of this book for people who are interested in reading it or who can't read it. The first principle, this is how I interpret it. The first principle is that this pain is not made up. This is a real pain that is being caused by these things, by things that are going on in your body. So no one's saying that your mind is making this up. This is very real. That's the first thing to get clear. The second thing, however, is that not everyone who has the injury that you have has this pain. And there's a statistic in the book that says that something like 80% of all adults have herniated discs in their lower back. It's just a function of us being upright. It's something that happened to us as mammals as we evolved, and walking upright for so long. The discs in our back deteriorate, and discs bulge, and herniations happen, and they happen to 80% of us, apparently. It's just that some of our bodies, use that as a trigger for pain. And that brings us to the third point, which is that what's going on here is that your mind is using this particular part of your body, for some people, your lower back, as a trigger point to manifest pain, in order to divert your attention away from emotional things that you are feeling that your mind thinks are going to be too debilitating if you actually look at them. I would say that where I am right now, after the course of really exploring what are the emotions in my life that I had been repressing and avoiding, after exploring all that, now I am pain-free. I haven't had the back pain for years, and now and I have all the feeling back in my leg, which they had told me I would never be able to regain. But now, when my back does act up, and it does, there are times when my back does clench up and give me pain, I don't immediately think, oh God, there's my herniated disc and I better watch out about how I stand or how I walk or whatever. And now when my back clenches up, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. My body is trying to tell me something. There's something going on for me emotionally that I'm not looking at. And that's always what it is. And when my back clenches up, it's a signal to me there's something that I need to be exploring, something emotionally that's really painful and difficult for me right now that I need to tap into.
Would you agree that prior to this experience, that you're a writer, you produce and direct and create and things around emotion, so it's not like you're afraid of emotion, but would you agree that there's a certain place where people go, I've watched it a lot recently in others, that there's a difference between intellectualizing your emotion and experiencing it, right? And so you can talk about this is probably how I feel, but that doesn't mean you're expressing or releasing the feelings.
Absolutely. You're right. It's exactly what you said. There's a difference between intellectualizing your feelings and actually experiencing them. And I am a writer, and I have meditated all my life, and I've been in therapy, in psychotherapy for years, and all these things I still do, by the way. I'm not saying that any of these things are bad, that meditation or therapy or any of those things are bad. I still do them. But I have a completely different approach to them now, and they have a completely different function in my life now. But to your question, yes, absolutely. You can talk about these things all you want, and oftentimes the talking is a scapegoat to actually feeling them. And there is a big difference between talking about them and meditating about them and actually feeling them. And I realized that I had probably for 20 years of my life had not ever experienced any of the real emotions that were going on in my life. And I have to say that still to this day, it's something that I struggle with. I think it's part of being a man, in our culture. Not to say that women don't have this problem also, but I think men in particular have this problem that still to this day, like, even though I've done all this work, I still, like, things will happen in my life. Small things and big things, but even just small things will happen in my life. And I will not experience the emotion that goes along with what happened until I catch myself much later, usually with some pain. Some pain in my body will signal to me that, I think it's hard for a lot of people, I'm one of them, a lot of men in particular, to experience sadness or to experience anger or to experience fear. At the most we may be able to talk about it, but we don't even know what it looks like to actually experience those emotions. Like, what does that actually look like?
Right.
When you're experiencing sadness, it could look like someone crying. When was the last time you saw a guy cry? But there's other ways of experiencing sadness. To experience fear, that's a physical thing. And rarely ever see people, even people that you're intimate with, like your parents or your partners, you rarely ever see what it looks like for people to experience emotions like that. And the thing is, we experience them every day. And that's what the really profound learning is for me in this whole thing. Because then that changes the way that you live your life entirely.
What was it like to experience the emotions you've been repressing for all that time?
Really scary. Really scary and really hard, because your body, it's no one's fault. It's just it's instinctive that your body tries to protect yourself and tries to avoid experiencing these emotions because it's part of evolution. These defense mechanisms that our body has are a way of survival. There's nothing wrong with the defense mechanisms, but it's just gotten to the point now where they're not necessarily as useful as they once were when we were living in caves.
Right.
And if anything, they're more detrimental to your physical well-being than they are helpful. So for me to experience them for the first time was really hard. Like, I would, sit there and be like, I don't even know. There's nothing that I'm repressing. I'm not repressing anything. I've been in therapy, I've meditated, and I'm not repressing anything. But Dr. Sarno says something in his book, and he says that if you knew what you were repressing, it wouldn't be repressed. So, and then because he talks about, he has some patients that come into his office and say, like, oh, I know what I'm repressing. It's about my boss or it's about my wife, and I just don't want to deal with it. And he's like, no, sorry, it's not those things. Because it's not about your wife or your boss or those things that you're able to list very easily, because if that were the case, you're not repressing those things. You might be suppressing those things, but you're not repressing those things. And Dr. Sarno's thesis in his book is, he says that after, examining thousands and thousands of patients, he says that anger is the emotion that it always comes down to, that everyone is repressing. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I think that for a lot of people, it could also be fear, or it could be sadness, or it could be a feeling of not being good enough. I think that those are all very strong emotions as well. But, I defer to Dr. Sarno in at least the fact that he says that everyone has repressed anger. So that's at least a good place to start. That's because he says that everyone has that, and for me, that was definitely the case too. I definitely had repressed anger, and then that was a good place to start. And then from the anger, then I was able to tap into my other repressed emotions.
So the reason why I brought up about the anger is because knowing you for a long time, you are the least angry person that I've ever, you're very easygoing, and like you said, you've meditated your whole life, and I've never seen you get mad at anything. And so I knew when you told me I was repressing anger, I thought, wow. There are some people out there who've got tempers, and that they've got anger, whether they want to look in the mirror and admit it or not. But you are one of those people who I thought, really? Okay. And you had anger. So what was that? For you, I could see you saying, I'm not angry.
Yeah, I'm not angry. Or I would say, well, there are times that I get angry, but I'm very constructive about my anger. I'm very healthy about my anger, and I'll express it in a constructive way and then be done with it. That would be the most that I would say. But generally I would say that I'm not angry. At that time I used to say that because I thought of anger as a bad thing. I very strongly felt that anger is not a good thing. My religion is a very pacifist religion. I believe in nonviolence. I believe in peace, on earth between people, all these messages that you get, which are very strong and are very true, that nonviolence is good and that peace is good and that anger can be very destructive. Those are all true messages. But my confusion was that I then took that a step further to interpret all of those things to also mean that anger was bad. That anger is just a thing that is really bad, and the less you have of it, the better person you are, and you should try to deal with it, quote unquote, in constructive ways. And what I've come to realize is that that's not part of the message. That's when people talk about peace is good and anger is destructive, that's true, but they're not saying that anger is illegitimate or bad in any way. Anger is just as important as happiness, as any other emotion in our lives. Anger is a very legitimate, useful emotion, is a very healthy emotion, and expressing anger is very healthy, and embracing your anger is very healthy. And if you don't, as I didn't, I felt like I didn't have any anger, it can destroy you. And that's what it did to my body. It really destroyed my body for years. And these tools like acupuncture and yoga and massage and energy work, those are all great, but I think that we need to understand why they're so great and why they're so powerful. They're not powerful because they are the answer. They are powerful because they unlock your blocks and can allow you to then experience your emotions more fully, which is the answer.
Very well put. Very well put.
I think a lot of people fall into that trap also. They fall into that trap of like, I'm a yoga practitioner, and this is what I do, and it's amazing, and yoga is the best thing ever, and oh my God, if you need help, you need to try acupuncture, because acupuncture will totally solve all your pains and all your problems and everything. That's not true. What acupuncture will do is that, like you're saying, it will unlock places where your energy is blocked, and that's great, and that's an amazing tool. But then you actually have to experience the energy, then now that you've been unblocked, that's great, but like, what are you going to do with that now that you've been unblocked?
Yeah, you can't go back to the same habits and ways of being that you were right before then, because you're just going to repeat the same pattern. Exactly.
It's like pouring Drano down your clogged sink drain, yes, it'll unclog the drain, which is great, so now that the drain can work again. But if you just clog it back up again the next day, then you're going to have the problem all over again.
Would you agree that that the book basically would apply to any kind of physical pain?
Absolutely. And I've applied it to all of the physical pains that I've had in my life ever since then. A lot of times people come along and they sort of like place one particular book up on a pedestal and say like, this has the answer to life. This book is part of a larger body of work around mind-body medicine that a lot of people have written about, and that is a legitimate area of study, in the medical field and in the psychological fields. This book hopefully will be a way for people to dip their toe into the larger field of mind-body medicine, and if they want to take that a step further into something that's more spiritually based, then that links into mindfulness meditation, which is a practice that's thousands of years old that is also part of the same sort of line of thinking. Exploring mind-body medicine and mindfulness meditation will absolutely change the way that you look at pain and experience pain and communicate with pain in your body and what it means to you.
Awesome.
The Fit to Love podcast show offers you 6 days a week of helpful content to achieve the happy life you deserve. Movement Mondays and Tasty Tuesdays are weekly videocasts, while Wellness Wednesdays, Thoughtful Thursdays, Freedom Fridays, and Sexy Saturdays are audio-only shows themed every week to address your holistic life and needs. If the show inspired you, we would love for you to share it and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Head on over to fittolove.tv for recaps of every show, resources, and to join the community. That's FIT, the number 2, LOVE.tv. Have a fit and fabulous day.